Welcome to Behind the Jewellery podcast, sharing positive stories from behind the jewellery industry and the people who shape it. In association with Chalmers Gems. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Marie.
Welcome to Behind the Jewellery. I've invited you onto our podcast to talk about your career because we're doing a lot of promotion about careers in the jewellery industry and how versatile they are, what educational backgrounds people come from, and just to promote how fabulous our industry is and that anybody can join us. So I would like you, please, to talk through your life. We want to know everything there is to know about you and how your career has progressed to where you are now. And I know it's not your favourite topic, but it's going to be amazing.
It's not my favourite topic. You're right. I don't know how you've got me to sit here to do this.
Powers of persuasion.
So you owe me.
Okay.
My career or my life, wow. How did I get where I am? I don't know really. There's no specific route. You mentioned education there. So
shall we start at the beginning? What sort of education did you have?
One that I wasn't very attentive to.
Okay,
to say the least.
Interesting.
Nor did I attend. So unfortunately, well, the first exam I ever passed was my 11 plus. And then I passed for King Edward's High at 5 ways, which in hindsight, I probably should have listened more to, but at the time frightened me to death. And they had an open day and we were in the library and I just couldn't understand what was being said to me, nor read the titles on the books in the library because they were all in French and Spanish.
So just to put some context in there, I think King Edward's is one of the schools that takes the top 5% of the country's intelligence.
Yeah. So I'm told.
So to pass the exam to get in there means that you are very intelligent.
Well, it means you pass their entrance exam, so you have to do a certain amount of coaching and work for that. And bless her, my mum was a teacher, and I think she had insights as to how and what I was capable of doing, and had different conversations. And yes, she did give me some, bless her, summertime coaching, to say the least, at home. I would be requested or asked by mum to sit and do English books and maths books whilst all my friends were up and down the street playing in the sunshine.
Oh, right.
But it did mean that I managed to pass at that level. Unfortunately for me, it just wasn't something that I was interested in or wanted. So basically refused to go.
Right.
Much to my parents' dismay. But the basis of that, I wanted to go to the local comprehensive school, which I personally felt would have suited me better. But that wasn't to be. So I was then made to go to an all-boys grammar school, which was, my recollection is, it was like something out of Charles Dickens.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it was not for me an enjoyable experience.
So
but that's strict. Not to say to people that they shouldn't take schooling properly. I'm not asking anybody to follow my footsteps because they're not right. No. And thankfully, in later years, my 2 very beautiful daughters didn't follow my footsteps at all, and both went to university and both got their degrees. So that's the right way to do it.
Right, okay.
But it was an extremely strict school, extremely strict, and had with it also quite a severe level of bullying that in those days was tolerated and understood. And if you complained, you were kind of a bit of a wuss, and you subsequently got bullied more for complaining. So you didn't complain, you sucked it up and you took it. And then sadly, you probably, as you grew, became the bully, and you then fed it back down to the younger years beneath. In fact, I'm surprised that people weren't seriously injured in some of the escapades that would go on with a bunch of testosterone-driven lads that knew no boundaries when they thought it was fun to use each other as footballs, to be honest.
So that's a whole podcast in itself.
Yes, It is. Absolutely, yeah. And being educated by an establishment that was mainly men brought with it its other problems that subsequently came out years later after I'd left, sadly.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, not good at all. No. Not good at all.
So what sort of education did you get? Lots of GCSEs or?
No. I have 2 GCSEs.
Well done. Which 2 do you have?
Well, I got my English and I got my art, but we were destined to take, I think it was 14 or 15 GCSEs. And I happened to get those two, what was then deemed as the fourth year, which I'm not sure what that means now. I was 15. So I don't know what year that would be
I
classed
think
that in.
it's year 10 or 11,
modern
something like that,
language.
isn't it?
But in ours, it was the fourth year. So that was a year early. And then if you did that, you then went on to sit other topics. So you could walk out with 14. I unfortunately didn't, and managed to spend a lot of my exam time in an establishment in Northfield that was called the Dukes, which was underneath the Grosvenor Shopping Centre, which was a pub. I don't think it exists anymore. And there was myself and a couple of mates who, spent some wild hour exam days away there, rather stupidly now in hindsight. As I say, I'm not advocating that people pass this route, but it wasn't for me. And subsequently I failed miserably. Had to go back to VSIT to sort of appease my parents because they were somewhat disappointed, to say the least. But that didn't work out for me, so I was requested to leave by the headmaster halfway through that Christmas term.
Amazing.
Yeah, which my parents to this day still don't know.
So, okay. So you quit school, didn't tell your parents.
Yeah, quit school, didn't tell my parents.
What did you do?
Pretended I was going to school for 6 weeks.
So you got dressed in uniform, got up and went to school?
Every morning.
I love it.
Waited till my parents went off to work, then came back, got changed. Sort of didn't do a great deal. But I was looking for work at the time. And then, sort of got into the world of anything that was possible to go, any job that would pay me some money in those days.
So what did you do?
And you could get cash jobs as well. So life was very different then. It wasn't as it is today. I've done everything from serve petrol, builders, laboured on building sites, door-to-door salesman, door knocking for carpet companies. I actually went to London later on when I was nearly 18 for 12 months to be a painter and decorator, which I really enjoyed, and only came back to Birmingham because at the time I thought I'd met the love of my life, which of course turned out not to be the case. And probably that's the one thing, if I could have done an alternative career, I would have stayed and got into the property management side of that company because I had a chance to do that. I could have gone into more of the management on building as opposed to learning the trade as a painter and decorator. But I did learn that trade, and I had a pair of fantastic old guys called Chaz and Dave who were just amazing and knew everything that there is. And you wouldn't think that painting and decorating is so complicated or such a skill, but it is. It really is. And I had a great 8-10 months down in the smoke. And my father was from London, so there was lots of memories for that. And it was actually through a family connection that I got offered the job. Wasn't a role, the job. And as I say, I think my cousin then, who was then owner of the business, they've now sadly closed because he's passed. Most of my family have passed on from that side. Would have taken me into the business and taught me about property and house buying and building and planning and all the rest of it. And probably had I've known the way the building trade was going to go and houses and renting and all the rest of it, I probably should have gone that route. I suspect as an alternative career, but I didn't. I came back to Birmingham, and it was then that I went off to learn how to be a draftsman, which was good. That was okay. I did that for a period of time.
Is that at college or?
Yeah, well, that was then. Life had started to change with different governments, and it wasn't quite so relaxed. You had to start to demonstrate that you had to do something that was credible. And it was actually a really interesting course, and I really enjoyed it. And you could then become a full-scale draftsman if you so wished, which I came close to doing at one point. There was two, they were copy houses in those days. We didn't have the technology that you've got now, and a lot of stuff was traced. So you'd start as a tracer because you had the basic drawing and hand skills to use the pens and pencils, and we were taught how to sharpen pencils on basically a piece of sandpaper, and then you had to get the perfectly thick sort of pencil line, so 0.5 mil or 1 mil, and we practiced for hours sanding and drawing before you then had these propelling pencils that became this revolutionary thing that we were allowed to use later on. And you had to learn how to write freehand. We started with stencils, and then you were taught how to draw your tram lines and then write within the tram line,
Right, okay.
which if anybody saw my writing today, it's more like a doctor's spider handwriting. It's hard to believe I could actually legibly write words that people could read in English. Yeah, so
What a cool skill.
it was then. Yeah, it was good at the time. It's subsequently lack of usage, and it's just disappeared. So yes, I would be about 18 by then, which would be probably when the first time I ever came to do some casual work for a gentleman called Chris Deere, bless his memory, who has also sadly passed away, died young. But he owned a company called Jewellery Jewellers, that was on the 6th floor of the Big Peg. He had 2 units up there, and that's the first time I encountered the industry. Yeah.
So what was your first job in the industry?
Tea-boy.
What a good job. But you knew everything.
Tea-boy and gopher. I needed to work. I wasn't allowed to stay at home. You weren't allowed to get money off the government. So I was prepared to do everything and anything, and I just did odd admin jobs for Chris. As I say, literally would fetch the sandwiches for the workshops, clean up, open the post, anything that didn't require. I had no, and have never had any bench skill training. So I have the utmost respect for anybody that's been trained fully in this industry, from designers to CAD to the printers to the guys and girls downstairs. Mine was always, invoicing, the pen pushing side of it, and I kind of just enjoyed it, but did it as a part-time role because I was also in those days DJing. So 11 evenings, so I was doing 5 nights a week at gigs, which I did for about 4 or 5 years, which was really good.
So DJing in nightclubs?
No, private and pubs. So I had a residency, but generally most of it was for private functions. But my claim to fame is having backed and supported an unknown band at the Town Hall in Birmingham. And I also famously, before they closed it first time round, played the Grand Hotel before it closed and got refurbed. So those were probably 2 of my biggest. But yeah, it was private function stuff, but it was good fun. And I had a full rig and all the kit and all the gear, and thousands and thousands of records. And yeah, it was a different life. And I did think at one point I auditioned, and this will be for the older generation will remember this. I did audition and was auditioned by Nicky Steele of BRB Radio in the day, going back 40 years, for a nightclub in Birmingham, and came 3rd out of 500 apparently.
Wow.
So yeah, it was something I really enjoyed, and also thought I might have ended up doing that as a career on the cruise liners. But unfortunately I chickened out.
Okay.
Should have gone. But again, another regret. I didn't take it. I didn't have the nerve to sort of go off into the world in those days. It wasn't something that everybody did like today. It was unusual, and I probably was a little bit mollycoddled at home. It was a bit too comfortable at home. So
in hindsight.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was too comfortable. And the sort of jewellery role started to grow, and it was then this balance of having a proper wage every week versus going off on this sort of cruising. Again, was different in those days, I think, to what it is today. So having chatted it through with family, it was kind of, not really, son. You need to, take the full-time job and earn the crust and pay your keep, which is, of course, what we did.
So how old were you there? About what age?
Around 19, 20, something like that, I think. And then that's when I really came into the trade full-time. Yeah, working for Chris permanently. So I'd be what? Yeah, gosh, that's 40 plus years ago. Yeah.
So then from there it went. So that became G&A Gallery, didn't it?
Oh yeah, Gallery grew and grew and grew, and Chris just had this incredible eye for product. He also had an incredible temper as well, good and bad. I can't. I mean, you look back on everything, and there were times in that when we all dislike stuff, but I do owe it to Chris for kicking me off in the trade, as he did many, many people. And if we were all really honest and truthful, Chris created an awful lot of wealth and jobs for a lot of people. And I think, we should be grateful for that. Equally, he wasn't necessarily always the easiest of people to work for. And if any of ex-colleagues listen to this and see this, they'll know what I mean. But yeah, it was good. And in the end, by the time he had come to sell the business to Abbeycrest, he'd got most of the top floor. And he pulled off an incredible deal because he sold it. And then literally 12 months later was when Ratner made his statement about jewellery and prawn sandwiches. And the jewellery market fell apart. By which time, though, he'd sold it and we were then G&A and Abbeycrest had taken us over. And that brought a whole new style of management that we'd never been exposed to before. In the old days of gallery, it was about you got there at 7 in the morning, you didn't go home till 7, 8 o'clock at night. And you did that 6 days a week. And part of us really enjoyed it because obviously you got paid and we had things like overtime and it was all done like that. It was very different. And then when Abbeycrest came, they brought the computers and everything was manual till that point. We thought we were posh when we got a fax machine. So it's kind of real old school as how it was done in the days when the trade had all the industry still around the quarter, which is sadly long gone now. I would estimate I would think there's about 3,000 less jobs now in this quarter minimum that used to be directly or indirectly involved in the manufacture of the jewellery.
Right. Okay.
So Birmingham has changed considerably. So Abbeycrest came and then it sort of moved on from there, really.
So how long did you work for Abbeycrest?
My first stint in the trade, I think it was about 17, 18 years.
And still within an administrative
Yeah, but I was sort of worked my way through the ranks. And we went through all sorts of shapes and changes, not all of them good at all. And we had some pretty horrendous times with redundancies and stuff like that as the trade changed and more of our industry went offshore. People discovered China and Thailand and places, and pricing became harder and harder, and anything that was multi-stoned became more and more difficult to produce and get. And then Indian product as well was in there. Not that there's anything against those countries at all. They make some very good products, but unfortunately it was at the detriment of what essentially was the trade that we knew. And I think that's where the damage really came, because that's where we really started to lose the continuity of skill. And also, of course, there was a lot of us that could come into the industry without academia. We didn't need that academic. We didn't need a degree. We wouldn't have got degrees. We weren't of that type of person. There were people that were getting degrees. I've got colleagues here today who work for us who are have clearly got degrees, but it wasn't typical. And we didn't have 3D printing and CAD as we know today. It didn't exist. It just wasn't there. And of course you didn't have phones and technology and the internet and all of that. That's all exploded through the last 30 or 40 years, as everybody knows. So as I say, we thought we were posh when we got a fax machine. It was all manually done, manual invoicing, manually written job sheets and cards. The whole thing was just a completely different environment to what we are today.
So within Abbeycrest as a manufacturer, did they do absolutely everything on site? So did they? No, they didn't design. So didn't they also outsource within the trade? So the fact they were here in the jewellery quarter meant that you could run jobs from one speciality to another.
Well, Abbeycrest were an importer in Leeds. They were a big importer of jewellery, gold jewellery, chain, earrings, creoles, all of that type of product. And the reason that they brought G&A was for the history of G&A.
Right.
They wanted to add it to their portfolio when talking to the retailers. So it was important to them to have that side of the business that they didn't have. And a side of the business that they didn't really necessarily understand in the early days. And I think that in itself brought them conflict, because they clearly were very successful as Abbeycrest. And the difference is with gold product, plain gold particularly, is yes, there is in certain products a high labour content, but you always have the option of selling it much easier by weight if you're not trying to do it by piece. Once you put something into a mount or a wedding band and put a stone and added all that value add, you can't go putting that stuff on the scales. It doesn't work. So the type of setting that is required is different. Also, the knowledge is different. You're then getting into finger sizes, you're getting into stone sizes, you're getting into stone grades, you're getting into a quality aspect of a product that is so different to that of what I think they were used to. And I think that caused them a lot of problems. They had a lot of issues with that. And then, of course, we weren't computerized. So the tracing of it all, as it sounds daft, as in the old days, we knew where it all was and it was all done very manually. But then all of a sudden the business grew and it wasn't so easy to keep track of it all. And the amount of outworkers we used grew, and we must have had 150 outworkers at one point, and because we were so busy, we had Gallery started as a jobbing shop, which is, to those who might not understand that, that's a repairing house where we would fix everything. Then we went into a small type of manufacturing where we were doing we were buying our castings from, in those days, Merrill's. And unbeknown to me, Gary would have been there, and unbeknown to Gary, I was there, and Gary Evro and I wouldn't have even knew we each existed. And then again, wherever we arrived today. So we were buying from there, and we were servicing a couple of major clients. And then the Ratner phenomena came when Ratner started to buy everybody up. And we had an opportunity, Chris got this opportunity to supply Samuel's down at Hunters Road. And it just exploded. Like, it's really hard to explain to people today the sheer volume of the amount of units that were being manufactured and hallmarked in Birmingham. But if you look back at the assay stats, it shows you in terms of millions.
30 million items.
Absolutely insane numbers to where we are today. And of course, there were ourselves, there was Centre Jewellery, there was Excalibur, there were other manufacturers, Birmingham jewellery manufacturers, all of who, well, Centre's still around, but I think most of the others have sadly now gone, because the trade equally years later changed back overnight the other way. It went the other way. By which time Abercrest owned us, and then you're into different costs, different expectations. Abercrest were shareholders. Shareholders expect payments, they expect dividends. It's not like being a private business where the owner can decide what profit is good profit, where do they want it to finish. When you've got shareholders, they expect a return for their investment, which is understandable. But it was a part of life that we had to learn very quickly, and I'm not sure we learnt it quick enough. But we got through it, and then the business grew, and we all moved from the Big Peg to where Tesco's is now, and we had that building there, and it was joined to Lois, and we had the back. There used to be more units, and again it grew and grew. But Abercrest still had their business in Leeds, and of course they had AML, which is Abercrest Manufacturing, which was around the back of Vice Street. And that all then, not the Leeds site, but the Birmingham sites got merged into one. And it just exploded with the amount of people and the staff. And that's where sort of I took, or the opportunity, I got sort of promoted and got more responsibility, and then ultimately became a director. And we went through a period of managing directors that I think we had about 8 in the space of 16 months. It was a crazy time. There was so much headcount change. And then, of course, they looked to moving all the production to Thailand.
Right.
Which I was involved in going over in the early stages to find the site, myself and 2 other colleagues of the day, which was Richard Allroyd and Sarah. We found the field, we found the site, and then I can remember coming back, because it's quite a while ago now, so you're testing the memory, and there was an opportunity potentially for me to go to Thailand, by which time I was married with kids, a young family, but I'd also started looking outside of the trade for another job. And I'd got offered then this alternative job. Having met Liz, my wife, through Abercrest, she came down. She was a Yorkshire lass, came down to Birmingham. That's how we met. And then we had just a discussion about would I go or wouldn't, would we go as a family or wouldn't we? And this other role came up out of the industry, and I just thought it would be good for me to do something different.
So you left the industry?
Yeah, I did. Shock horror. I know. I did leave the industry. and I had 7 years away. And I have to say, it was a really brilliant experience and probably one of the best things I ever did.
So what did you do?
To go and get this alternative look at how other businesses are run. And there's part of me that would advocate everybody to do that if it's possible. So Helix was a company that designed, manufactured and imported lighting, domestic lighting. So we did everything from a replacement lampshade that you might find in B&Q to I think the largest fitting we did was a 12-arm crystal chandelier fitting that we supplied to the likes of Laura Ashley and John Lewis and people.
Wow.
So we traded with the sheds, we traded with the main stores, we traded with the supermarkets. And yeah, it was, again, it was a private business, which I have always enjoyed, managing private businesses. So I went there as operations director, and it was over in a place called Rushden, the other side of the M1. So it was about 50 miles away. So that was an interesting thing in itself. And then starting to commute out of Birmingham every day, morning and night. And then that role took me all around the world, which was probably one of the best things about it. It was fantastic. Getting to see other countries, other cultures. And we grew that business. We had an incredible time growing that business. It was very successful. But as I say, that took me at the height. I was probably spending at least 5 months a year offshore, which is good and bad, because with a young family, it meant you miss stuff. And actually, looking back at it, it's not a real life living in a hotel. It becomes, one, it's incredibly lonely. I learned to eat a 3-course meal in about 10 minutes because you've got nobody to talk to. So there's no delay between courses. And I think waitresses and waiters take a bit of a soft spot on you and feel a bit sorry for you. You look a bit sad when you're sat there on your own with your this meal and your bottle of wine, because there's just nobody to interact with. So you try taking a book, but if you're reading a book, you can't cut your food, and then it just becomes a nonsense. But I got the bug for the travel then, and then that took me all through, as I say, the developing part of China. It took me into India, took me through Europe, took me into America, all this stuff, and it was really opened my eyes to what was outside in the world. So that was a great time, until the owner, as always happens, chose to sell. All of a sudden he had some personal problems that came up with family bereavement, and it changed his view on the world, which is fully understandable. I don't blame him for it at all, but he sold out really quickly and didn't want to do a sell out to the management team, sold it to another company, and by which time I'd become his managing director, and is many the case the new company wanted their own MD. So within 8 months I found myself in a meeting that didn't last very long, and then I found myself without a role.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, and it is a shock. I have to say, it is, having sat both sides of the table, and in some ways it probably did me some good, because it teaches you a bit of humility, and you learn what that feeling feels like, and I would never want it again, and hopefully I'll never get it again, particularly now at the age I am. But also subsequently, if I've ever had to make people redundant since, I am mindful of the feeling, and we have a duty as managers to our people. It's one I take really seriously, and it's something I've learned over the years, and wished I'd known 30 years ago how to be a better manager. But of course, in those days, it wasn't about that. You weren't taught how to manage. You sort of learned it by osmosis, really, in the way, and you either were or you weren't. So I found myself with a young family, mortgage, and needing a job.
Wow.
And if I'm honest, when I applied for the role here at Weston Beamore, had I known, when I read the advert, it didn't say jewellery, it said luxury goods, which of course it is. Had I have known it was jewellery, I probably wouldn't have applied.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. And I don't mean that in any way disrespectful to the trade, but I think it was because I'd been and done the trade, and my history, and I'd cut my teeth in the trade, so there was good and bad history in that sense. As I say, management style possibly left a bit to be desired. I probably wanted to stay out in other creative products, and I really wanted to sell what they call off-table So that would be basically anything you can put on a dining table. I would have liked to have been involved in that.
Right. Okay.
And so if you think of going to the spring fair at the NEC, that's full of off-table product,
Right.
bowls, plant pots, all that sort of stuff, all the stuff that you dress your house with. I've always had a real good interest on that. I have an interest on jewellery, and I like jewellery. But I guess I wouldn't have necessarily have come back had there been the equivalent of Western Beam on a homewares side. But there wasn't. And anyway, I then met Viv and Patrick and started the interview process, and it became very clear to all sides that it was a good fit. So I joined here in 2008, February the 3rd, I think it was, or maybe the 1st. It was a Friday. My first day was spent with Patrick in Ireland, and then, into here the following week. So
as managing director?
As managing director, yeah, which was easier to come in as managing director than, and it was easier to be managing director and a director at Helix than it was to be promoted through the ranks, because it's not, anybody that's come that way will know it's not always straightforward, because people have preconceived ideas, and by the time I was back here, I'd personally changed and learned a lot more, and as I say, had the humility of losing a role to find a role, to go through all of that, changes you. So you come with a much broader, and all the travel and seeing different environments and working conditions and having to deal with different people had given me much more experience by then. So you come in with much more managerial knowledge. And of course, I'd also by then been back to college and had studied through for my DMS and MBA.
So that's an unusual choice for a non-academic.
Yeah, well, I needed the piece of paper.
Okay, for
what? Because you can tell people you can do it, but if they don't know, you've no way of showing them.
Right.
So you have to have a qualification. That's the one thing I've learned about qualifications. You have to have a qualification on paper to show people, strangers. So when you're applying for a job, you can't write on your CV, I'm really good at this.
I mean, you can,
well, you can.
but it might not work.
Yeah, but it wouldn't actually work.
So what parts of your career did you decide to then get your qualifications?
What parts what?
Of your career, which part? So when you were at the light company?
No, it was just before I went there, actually, to be honest. I was in my 30s with 2 kids, so it meant that I couldn't do any of the, and I was working full time, so it was done on a strange sort of random block release times. And then typically I would work at home from about 9 o'clock at night till 2 or 3 in the morning on my studies.
Wow.
Bring it in, and then the PA at the time and people who could type would very graciously type it all up for me.
Oh, that's kind.
Which was really good. And then I'd take that home, review it, and then we'd go on to the next paper, and then there'd be the next module and the next module. And that took me 18 months. And I managed to pass that with a distinction, which I then took that certificate home and gave it to my mum. And said, finally, here you go. Because I followed all of my sisters who had all been to university and all got their degrees, and as the only boy, that wasn't the plan for me. And as I say, Mum already knew of where she thought I was supposed to go. So it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek tick for her.
Oh, that's nice.
But mothers being mothers are always proud of their sons.
They are.
Yeah. So they're very forgiving. So she forgave me. So yeah, so...
You didn't turn out too bad though, so...
Well, yeah, it depends who you ask, I think. So I came back. Yeah, I came back into the trade with a very different view, a very different approach. And that was 2008, and it's 19 years ago.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it is, and I didn't expect to stay another 19 years, or I will now undoubtedly see out my working career at some point from the industry. But it has given me so much. It has contributed so much to my life. And I joke with 1 or 2 people around the trade, and if they listen to this and see, they'll know what I mean when I said I'm not interested. I am interested, but I'm interested, and I do it a different way. I prefer to be in the background as opposed to be out there. But I'm very concerned about the trade. I care about the trade. I care deeply about the people in this business. I'm proud of all the apprentices that we've had come through here. I'm proud of the training that we've seen and the development of both bench skills and managerial skills. I'm proud of the support that we give to the educational side of the industry. And we need to do more, and the industry needs to do more, because if it doesn't, it's going to disappear, or it's going to be, it'll always exist because there'll always be designer makers, and I think there will always be companies of a certain size. But if the industry doesn't realise that it needs to feed itself, then I think it's going to get harder and harder to attract the right people into the industry and to get the next set of generational people that will learn a skill, learn a career, and will have 30, 40 years in it. And there's nothing wrong with having 30 or 40 years in one industry. I know I said earlier I would advocate that everybody goes and does something different, but I appreciate that if you are a highly skilled craftsman on the bench, or lady, or in design, then you can have a whole career in this industry. But for me, it's all the careers. It's the salespeople, it's the retail people, it's the people in the offices, it's the accounts people. This industry is unique in its community side, and there's some people that do some fabulous amounts of work in the industry that are relentless in promoting it, and we need to be careful that we don't lose it. We really
Absolutely.
do. Generally, the industry is shrinking, and we're all culpable of that. And if I could get all the retailers in the land to turn 5% of their spend back, I know some of them spend a lot in the UK already, and thank you very much for that. But if they could turn 5% of their spend, collective spend, back into buying British made, it would by default drive an increase in jobs, careers, training, process, and improvement all round, and we would retain the skill sets.
Do you think that the jewellers are aware that it's actually that simple, that 5% of your buying power is not very much?
Well, I pick 5% as an arbitrary figure.
Oh, okay.
Please don't ask me to back that with any numbers.
I now want the data. That
Yeah, no, I'm sure somebody out there could actually put figures to that. But if you think of the size of the industry is 5.6 billion, and I know that includes an element of watches, just with numbers of that size, 5% of a couple of billion is millions. So therefore, by default, that figure, arbitrary as it is, I believe is something that is a marker. Christ, if they could put 10%, fine. The problem is if they turn it over tomorrow, the industry couldn't cope because we don't have the skill set.
No.
We don't have the volume of people. So it needs to be gradual. I can't comment on how other people are thinking. That's not for me. I wouldn't be so rude as to say how they should behave. There are many, many successful businesses out there, but I hear consistently that there is a shortage of trained staff everywhere, right the way through the industry, both retail and manufacturing. But I have to talk about manufacturing. I'm not equipped to discuss retail so easily. And the industry needs to spot it. I think it needs to really decide how it wants to be, because there's only so many people that can be trained by a limited few that then get taken by other businesses to be used, that everybody has to get involved in that, because it's very tiring. It's a huge expense. There's a big commitment to training apprentices. And thank goodness we've got people like the Goldsmiths, and we've got the NAJ getting involved, and we've got the School of Jewellery and some of the other training academies that we've all dealing with. But it's not enough, and it's not enough for us to just keep taking the limited few people. And as I say, not every business commits itself to the training side. But we need volume. We need that volume, because you don't have to all be the top end, high end setter and goldsmith. We also need the people that are prepared to sit every day at a bench doing some of the more mundane tasks. They're just as important. And if we don't have the volume to feed into those people, then the manufacturing businesses can't generate the wealth to then train the people, because that's where it'll come from in many cases. That said, I talk to more and more retailers who have their own workshops and are training their own people, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, you definitely see that more.
That is increasing.
So do you think, if you look back at your gallery days, and a few people that we've podcast actually came as apprentices, not necessarily bench apprentices. There was obviously huge apprenticeship schemes that ran across the UK, and which were then stopped. Do you think there's a gap So the apprenticeship schemes were running and people were joining them. I know my husband was on a YTS scheme as an electrician, and then suddenly they disappeared. What I'm trying to work out historically, what was the shift that stopped us creating apprentices? Do you know?
No, I'm not
No.
sure I do know. That's a very political question to ask me about the state of the nation. Do I know? Well, obviously we lost things like the polytechnic colleges, which is where they would train the mechanics and the sparkies and the plumbers and all of that. And that's obviously come back. That is back now, thankfully. And things like HS2 are huge projects that drive the need for the engineers and the sparkies and the electricians and the technicians. So that's a massive government investment that creates its wealth then. And again, we talk about house building requirement in this country. They need 1.5 million homes. I doubt that there are enough chippies and plumbers and sparkies to build those houses. That's the problem. So as a nation, we tend to seek outside help for that, which is good and bad. But again, for our industry, yes, we have the School of Jewellery. If you look at the sort of mix of nations that there, it's not necessarily all home for the home market. We obviously have other manufacturers and people that are, like I say, there are retailers who are now training their own workshops, which is good. You've got people like other manufacturers around the quarter that are in London that are training people. But effectively, it's about having that desire to do it. And the challenge is, like I've said, where the colleges and the government do their training and they en masse produce volume of people, the training now is undertaken typically, or more often not by, with the exception of, say, the Goldsmiths Company, more private enterprises. The risk you have is you spend tens of thousands of pounds training somebody who can very easily be phoned up, take a call, and somebody will effectively poach them away from you.
For a couple of grand more.
More. And I understand that happens, but it doesn't then encourage you to keep going necessarily. We've decided that we will keep going.
What is the solution to that, do you think? Is there one?
Well, we need a trade body, a trade capability to train more people.
So
there is a volume. The issue we have, though, to have that to create the jobs, and this is why I think, and this is me in a very simple world, and there are people out there that can do the politics and the words far better than me. And again, they'll smile when they hear me say that, and they know who they are, and they're very impressive people. Again, though, you've got to have the value to drive that. So it's linked with buy more from within. If people bought more product, if I just take my own business, if people bought more product from me, I'm going to need more staff.
Yeah.
Those staff don't exist. So therefore, what do I have to do as a business? I have to train people, or I have to feed the outworkers. We know the outworker base is also shrinking. So, but if we have enough, then you can afford enough, then you plan for it and you train for the future. So you encourage people to come into the industry because it's seen as a thriving industry. It's seen to grow better. So that's what I mean, where I, in my simple world, think it's self-fulfilling. It's a real straightforward equation for me. If I have more business, if I need to make more products, then I will need more people.
Yeah.
But also it has a knock-on effect too. If I have more people, I need more uniforms, I need more tools. So you buy more tools from the tool manufacturer, you buy more uniforms from the uniform manufacturer, you buy more people come into the quarter, so more people go to the cafe, they buy more sandwiches. It has all of that then more people will go to the Roseville or the Lion or whatever. So it generates its own economy of its own. And you don't notice it as it's going because it goes away as a drip. It's not like we didn't have, say, like a big crash like the steel industry or coal mining where the government just decided they weren't going to do it anymore and tens of thousands were made redundant. The change in this industry was a drip. And I think a lot of that happened as well when I left the industry in that 7 years.
Right.
Because when I came back, it was a very different shape of industry, but it still had this, I don't think it recognised it then, and it should have recognised it then. And I certainly realised on my return that the business I joined, Western Beam, was always supported training apprentices. And I realised how important it was very early on. So, which is why as MD, I continued to support that mantra, and I still do to this day. There are some really good things going on, and Ben from the NAJ and people at Upton University and the assay officer involved having these skills meetings, etc. And I think that's brilliant. But somehow we have to get the whole industry to just engage, I think, just a little bit more. And decide that the next, what is it going to look like in 5 and 10 years' time? I've been very lucky. I've had the majority of my career from this industry, and I'm very grateful to it. And I've met some fantastic people. But I'm coming to the end of my time just by sheer anno domini. That's no hidden secret there. It's just I'm getting old, and I'm going to stop, and I'm going to want to rest. So I've been very fortunate. I wonder if there are people today that could say they will end up having 40 years in an industry. If they joined today at 20, would they still be here in 40 years' time? I'm not sure.
No,
I don't know. It'd be nice. Well, unfortunately, I won't be around here to see that, but it'd be nice to think they could. I just think we need to be making that happen, that happen today. And I'm not knocking the work that's going on. There's a lot of work that's going on. So, Morton's not just moaning. I am conscious that we play an active part as a business. So we will continue to support, pay our fees, pay our duties, support the courses, and recruit and take on apprentices for as long as I'm here doing it. Yeah, it's very important.
Amazing. Do you have a career highlight?
Wow. Yeah, I think, well, there's more than one. I think obviously from a personal point of view, becoming a director and then a managing director was extremely good. I think the real highlights and enjoyment and feeling of satisfaction come from when I've seen us win different accolades at different events that are voted for by our peers or our retailers or whatever that is. But really when I see apprentices come and join and stay and get a career, or certainly the starts of a career, and learn the skill and see them develop, and not just that's not just bench apprentices, that's people within office roles, managerial roles. When you see the development of your people and you see them, I always say to my people, I want to employ people that are good enough to leave, because really that's what you want, because that makes them capable of moving on. So whilst at times I never want anybody to leave in the sense of I want you to get out, it's when people go because they've got an opportunity, because they're good enough, that's then when I get quite parental and feel, oh, there's one of mine that's gone out into the world.
Fledged.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And it's very nice when I see some of them later on and they come and say hello and shake my hand and they're succeeding and going on into their careers. It's nice to have thought that maybe we had a little bit to do with what they're doing now and where they've moved to. So yeah, seeing the people grow is probably the best highlight that you can have.
Oh, that's a good answer.
Thank you.
Right, well, we're going to end the podcast with the same question that we ask everybody,
okay,
which I have sent you in advance, but whether you've read it or not, I don't know. So if you were to if you had an unlimited amount of money and you could choose anything, a gemstone, piece of jewellery, a watch, anything from within our industry, what would you choose and why?
I did read it and I have actually got an answer for you. So it's two answers. One, obviously, I would buy my daughters and my wife, I would have them design of their choice with the fantastic designers we have here, some diamond jewellery of their choice, ears, rings, neckwear, bangles, the whole suite, money no object, diamond, absolute naturals, top quality, etc. But it would have to be made here, of course.
Okay.
It would be a British made piece in this company, which would be fantastic. That aside, because that's an obvious thing, what actually would, and I know nothing about them, I can't talk to you about them, which is why I would want one, because I would sit on the shelf and it would be a real talking point, and I would love a Fabergé egg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd expect me to say that at all, because they're just so unique. And I know obviously there's a deep history, and it's remiss of me not to know anything about it. In fact, I probably should go and read up about it. But I just think they're so wonderful, and they are just so different.
They're just craftsmanship.
It's just there, isn't it? And it's everything that we stand for as a trade. So I think to have one of those on your mantelpiece would just be, one, I would be lovely to be that rich, I think. But it would just be such a talking point. And yeah, so that's where I would go. I would have a Fabergé egg.
What a treat.
Yeah, there you go.
It's been really interesting to listen to the answers, because lots of people have regrets of things they should have bought. So, I was once offered, and I should have bought that. It's been really interesting to hear all the answers.
Well, if it's a regret, of course, I wish I'd, in my early days, bought a couple of kilo of fine gold.
Me too.
And then I possibly could buy a Fabergé egg. So
you could own Fabergé if we were clever enough.
So there you go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Really enjoyed it, and I hope we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye.